Da 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 da. Welcome back to disenFRIENDSchised, the podcast that explores disenfranchised grief in each episode of Friends. I'm Karen Mathison, founder of The Naked Grief and creator of the disenFRIENDSchised podcast. We're diving into a big one today, folks. This isn't just any episode, it's a record breaker. The one that aired right after Super Bowl 30 in 1996 and had over 50 million people watching. But while the rest of the world was looking for celebrity cameos like Jean-Claude Van Damme, Brooke Shields, and Julia Roberts, I was looking for the hidden heartache. Because even in a double-sized, star-studded extravaganza, grief is still sitting right there on the orange sofa waiting to be acknowledged. So this is a two-parter, so it's going to be a little longer than usual, more than likely. This is the episode where Ross is still reeling from the empty nest syndrome. If the nest was a bachelor pad and the baby was a capuchin monkey named Marcel. After seeing a beer commercial featuring a monkey that looks exactly like his former roommate, Ross heads to the San Diego Zoo to find him. What he finds instead is a web of lies. The zoo administrator tells him Marcel is dead, only for a janitor to reveal that Marcel was actually kidnapped and sold into show business. Meanwhile, Joey is riding the high of his new role as Dr. Drake Ramore on Days of Our Lives, but he quickly learns that fame comes with a side of holy crap. He meets Erica Ford, Brooke Shields, a woman who doesn't just like his work, she believes that he is Dr. Drake Ramore. She's stalking him, licking his hand at dinner, and living in a complete fantasy world. And then there's Phoebe. Our girl gets a gig singing for kids at a library, but instead of singing about the itsy bitsy spider, she's dropping truth bombs about grandparents dying, farm animals getting slaughtered, and the reality of bisexual relationships. The parents are horrified, and the kids are obsessed. So identifying characters in grief. When we talk about types of grief, we usually think of a funeral. But in this episode, we see three very different kinds of different franchised versions. Ross, the pet parent. Ross is mourning a pet because it's more complicated than that. He's mourning a companion who represented a specific time in his life, breaking free from one identity and finding a new one, preparing for becoming a father while he was taking care of Marcel. When Marcel became too much to handle, he became that adult-like father. Instead of finding him a college to go to, he was finding him a new place to live, and he wanted the best for Marcel. Phoebe as the truth teller. Phoebe is grieving the loss of innocence, not just her own, but the collective innocence of a society that lies to children about how the world really works. I'd love for you guys to chime in on this, because I'm kind of split on where I land with Phoebe's way of expressing the truth too. And then we've got Erica Ford, the fantasy mourner. Stay with me here, because Erica is likely grieving her own reality. Her obsession with a fictional doctor suggests a deep, unmet need for connection or a way to bypass a life that's too painful to live in. So naming the disenfranchised grief, the ambiguous loss, and censored reality. The term disenfranchised grief refers to a loss that isn't openly acknowledged, socially validated, or publicly observed. In this episode, we see two major disenfranchised grief examples. The ambiguous loss, Ross and Marcel. When Ross is told that Marcel is dead, he experiences immediate, sharp grief. Mourning, bereavement. But when he finds out that Marcel is actually alive and filming Outbreak 2 in New York City, the grief shifts into something called ambiguous loss. This is a type of grief where there is no closure. Is Marcel the same monkey Ross once knew? Is he being mistreated? The death was a lie, which also just complicated his way of processing everything that he's been told. But the reunion is staged on a movie set behind barriers. And dealing with the loss of a pet is already hard enough because society often tells us it's just an animal. But when that animal is missing or somewhere out of your life, the brain gets stuck in a loop. Ross can't fully move on because the door isn't closed. It's just locked. Socially silenced grief, Phoebe's hard truths. Phoebe's storyline is a brilliant metaphor for how we censor grief. When she sings for the kids about the truth, the parents freak out. They want the Barney version of life. Everything is purple, everything is happy, and nobody ever dies. By silencing Phoebe, the parents are effectively telling the kids that their questions about death and reality aren't allowed. This is how we create adults who don't know how to handle loss. We tell them grandma is sleeping instead of saying she's gone. We censor the grief before it even has a chance to breathe. All right, I'm going to take a pause in this episode and get into some hard truths here, since we're speaking of Phoebe's hard truths. For those of you that actually follow my career, my story, all of that, you probably know that I used to work in a cemetery. Well, the cemetery I worked at had a pet cemetery in it. Humans and pets can't share the same part of the cemetery, but they can be buried close. And the connections that you can create in that cemetery is by putting last names on the pet markers, putting paw prints on the owner's markers to kind of unify and connect so that people can understand that story. Because it is a love story, right? If you're going to spend that kind of time and money to find a cemetery to house not only yourself, but your four-legged companions, you want that connection. Well, I had a family come in because they had 2 dogs and they were brothers and one had passed, and they wanted to go through and pick out 2 sites for the dogs. They wanted to make sure they got markers. They wanted everything done correctly. Now, with a pet loss, if you're going into a cemetery, you need a casket. And the casket can be twofold because it can also be what the most parks want is an out of burial container. So it's something that preserves the casket and the ground, so the ground stays a little bit more stable underneath of under and above the being placed there. Well, I'm not telling you that part as much as I need to tell you this part. When they came in, they said, so our kids think that he's still at the vet, but we want to do the service without our kids here because we don't want to expose them to death. I have to honor what the family wishes, but I do remember when they said that hit me funny because I'm like, wow, so they've never been exposed to death. They've got 2 dogs in their house that have grown up with them. The kids were in their mid, 5, 6, 7-year-old range. So old enough to understand, but young enough to also process it different. So I understood where they were coming from, but I also didn't completely. Because when they said, we're not going to tell them, but we want to say our goodbyes, I'm thinking, what happens when they ask, why is the dog still at the vet and it's been months? Well, a year later, they came back because the brother dog now died. And now they had the hard conversation to have with their kids and admit to them, the first dog died a year ago and you didn't get to say goodbye. So think about what Ross went through when he first went to the San Diego Zoo to see Marcel and was told he's dead. Now you're hit with this. Why didn't anybody call me? I need closure. How am I supposed to process this? And that can really mess you up. It can cause you to question everything, right? So now their kids are 7 and 9, I think, older, able to process. How much anger did they feel towards their family for not letting them get closure when the first dog passed? They're going out to the site now to say their goodbyes, and they're grieving 2 dogs, not just the one. I share this with you because it rattles my heart. So with Phoebe trying to better explain death to these kids that may never experience death until their 20s, I don't know. I would really like to know how you guys feel about that. So now let's jump back into the episode now that I just shared my little story. when you're analyzing friend support, how do the friends handle all of this stuff going on in the first part of this episode? In classic 90s sitcom fashion, with a healthy dose of deflection and the lion sleeps tonight, Ross is upset about Marcel. Chandler makes jokes about Marcel's overzealous sex drive. And it's funny, but it's also a classic example of minimization. They treat Ross's search for Marcel as a quirky hobby rather than a deep emotional need for closure. However, the friends do show up, and they go to the movie set and they sing the song and they help Ross navigate the scheme to save Joey from his stalker by creating a alter ego for Joey when she's trying to figure out, how are you on TV and right here in front of me right now? Because again, she's living in a false reality. We don't know everything that Eric is going through, but she probably needs some additional help. They bring a holding space that is messy and ridiculous, but at least it's a space. And sometimes the best mental health support isn't a deep conversation. It's throwing a glass of water in your friend's face to help him out of a jam. Do you remember that? Monica and Rachel both said, like, and you fooled me, and they threw water at him, and then Chandler even steps in. So coaching moments with protecting your kids versus preparing them. This episode gives us a massive what if scenario. What if we actually allowed Phoebe to sing her songs? We have this instinct to protect children from the hard parts of life. We think we're doing them a favor by keeping the concept of death away from them. But research in mental health and TV shows and real life shows the opposite. When we don't give children the language for grief, they grow up feeling broken when they finally experience it. So maybe reframing the truth is what was more needed. Phoebe isn't being mean, she's being honest. If we told children, yes, the cow in the book is where the hamburger comes from, or yeah, people sometimes get sick and don't get better, we'd be giving them the tools to process the world. A coaching tip could be, stop fixing the feelings of the children or friends in your life. When someone says they're sad because their pet died, don't say, we'll get a new one. Say, I know you loved them so much, and it's okay to be sad. Don't be the library parent who shuts down the song. Be the kids who track down Phoebe at Central Perk because they want to hear the truth. And a bit more of my own personal story with that. So my boys were 7 and 11 when we lost their dad. And my youngest, it would break my heart. He would go up to strangers at the McDonald's playground and he'd say his name. And then the next thing out of his mouth is, I don't have a dad. He's dead. It would just shatter my heart to hear it. I felt my blood run cold. I felt helpless. At night, he'd cuddle next to me on the couch and he'd say, I miss Dad. I wish he'd come back. And my reflex reaction was to say, you'll see him again someday, or he'll come back, because that's what you want to say. You want to comfort with the right kind of words. But there are no words when it comes to death. There is no way to really process and understand how we're feeling and the fact that it is so permanent when everything in the world is temporary. Jobs, homes, friendships, like everything's temporary. Death is permanent. How do you move to that? It's very challenging. So that being said, think about how you want to approach these kinds of conversations with the younger folks in your life, or even with yourself. Are you living in that Barney Purple world, or are you facing that reality? Sometimes that's why the Grief Garden characters come into play. In my Grief Garden, there are several different stories, but more importantly, it's all about the different connections that are made and why we go through it. I have one story about Chance the dog, who His first interactions inside of the garden are regret the toad and denial the chameleon. Why? Because Chance doesn't even know that he passed, and he's trying to process his own reality, but he's also feeling regret because he didn't tell his girl goodbye because he didn't know what was happening to him. I'm not sharing this with you to sell anything. I'm sharing this with you because sometimes we need to understand the different companions that are with us to make things more relatable and easier to process. Again, death is permanent. And a lot of times we feel the denial, the regret, the anger, because we don't know how else to explain to our heads what has happened because our hearts just feel so shattered. So imagine a world where we didn't have to hide our stalkers, our traumas and delusions, or lie about our monkeys, our unconventional losses. If Joey had the tools to set boundaries with Erica earlier, or if the zoo had been honest with Ross from day one, so much energy could have been saved. We spend so much time pretending that things are fine to make the other people in our lives comfortable. And with what Phoebe is doing, she's the only one in the episode who refuses to do that. And while she gets fired for it, she's the only one who truly connects with her audience. So grief isn't always a black veil and a cemetery. Sometimes it's a monkey in a beer commercial or a song about a farm. If you've been feeling a loss that society hasn't given you permission to feel, you're in the right place. Check out our deep dives and resources for navigating the naked truth of loss at thenakedgrief.com. You can also watch our full breakdowns on our YouTube channel. So stay with me because we're going to continue with Super Bowl theme for part 2, where we're going to talk about Julia Roberts and Susie Underpants and the long-term grief of childhood bullying. Trust me, you don't want to miss how Chandler Bing's past comes back to haunt and undress him. Stay with me. Da 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 da. Here in episode 13 of season 2, the one after the Super Bowl part 2, we're going to continue with Hollywood in the Village. This episode is packed. We have 4 main storylines, each acting as a vessel for a different kind of hidden pain. First, Ross sees a Monkey Shine beer commercial and realizes his former pet Marcel is a star. He goes on a quest to Los Angeles and eventually a movie set in New York City to find him. He's told that Marcel is dead and then finds out he was kidnapped for show business. It's a roller coaster of he's gone, no he's not. He misses you, and then when he does reconnect, he misses you, but he really kind of doesn't. Next, Joey lands the role on Days of Our Lives and attracts Erica, played by the iconic Brooke Shields. Erica is a stalker who can't distinguish between Joey and his character, Dr. Drake Ramore. It's funny until you realize it's a terrifying look at a total break from reality. Then we have Phoebe, as we talked about before, who gets a gig singing to kids at a library. But instead of the wheels on the bus, she's singing about where milk comes from. It involves a cow being squeezed and the painful truths of life. The parents are horrified. The kids are enthralled. Finally, the heavyweight plot, Chandler meets Susie, Underpants Moss. She's a makeup artist on Marcel's film set who spent 20 years plotting revenge on Chandler Bing for a 4th grade prank that ruined her life. She lures him into a public bathroom, steals all of his clothes, and leaves him wearing nothing but her hot pink panties. So the character deep dive, the just a monkey problem. Let's talk about Ross. To the rest of the gang, Marcel was just a nuisance who pooped in shoes and played The Lion Sleeps Tonight on repeat. But to Ross, Marcel was his companion during his first year of being a single, divorced man preparing for fatherhood of his expected baby. When Ross finds out that Marcel might be dead, he is crushed and devastated. When he finds out that Marcel is a movie star who doesn't have time for him, he's even more hurt. This is classic pet loss grief compounded by ambiguous loss. Marcel is alive, but he's not his anymore. Society often mocks the depth of the bond between humans and animals. If you've ever had a friend say, it was just a dog, cat, monkey, you've experienced this disenfranchised grief. Ross isn't just looking for a monkey, he's looking for the version of himself that he felt he needed. Then there's Susie Moss. Julia Roberts plays her with a frantic, flirtatious energy that masks 2 decades of pure, unadulterated shame. When Chandler lifted her skirt in the 4th grade, he didn't just expose her underwear, he exposed her to a lifetime of bullying. She was Susie Underpants until she was 18. This is delayed disenfranchised grief. She grieved her reputation, her sense of safety, and her childhood innocence, all because of a joke. So we see 2 major forms of grief in this episode that the world usually tells us to keep quiet: the chronic childhood shame. Susie Moss didn't just have a bad day in 4th grade, she carried that humiliation into her adulthood. This is grief of the unshamed self that she never got to be. Because it happened so long ago, society experts expects her to be over it, making her revenge feel crazy rather than a response to trauma. And honestly, if she had done any of the cognitive behavior techniques to reposition what she had gone through, she may have not decided to bully Chandler in return for and get revenge. The loss of innocence with Phoebe. Phoebe's refusal to sing regular Kitty songs. And why? Because Phoebe's childhood was a series of brutal lies and even more brutal truths. She's grieving the childhood that she never had by trying to arm these library kids with the real truth. She feels that lying to them is a betrayal. And I guess that's true. When you're 12 years old and your mother commits suicide by putting her head in the oven, that changes a lot of your perspective on reality and life and everything. She really is kind of like the guru of the group. She comes up with these amazing visions and explanations. Now let's dive into the keep your panties on kind of friend support that was given throughout these 2 episodes. When Ross is emotional about Marcel, Chandler makes funny jokes about Marcel and his sex drive. When Ross is worried about Marcel's health, they're more interested in the beer commercial. The gang treats Ross's connection to Marcel as a weird quirk rather than a valid relationship. But when Chandler is left in the bathroom wearing panties, the friend's reaction is to mock him. Now, obviously, Chandler deserved some of this for what he did to Susie. But notice the cycle. Chandler humiliates Susie, Susie humiliates Chandler, and the friends continue the humiliation. No one stops to say, hey, why are we all so obsessed with public shaming? Phoebe's the only one who stays true to her mission. Even when the community tries to shut her down, she validates the kids' curiosity, even if her delivery is a bit unconventional. So some coaching moments in validating the minor trauma. If we're sitting on the orange sofa with these guys, here what I'd be coaching. The validation of the old scars. To Susie Moss, your pain is valid. Being bullied for a decade because of a classmate's prank is a traumatic event. However, carrying it for 20 years without processing it led to a revenge plot that ultimately didn't heal the original wound. She didn't feel any better after. She might have for the moment, but revenge doesn't help that whole karmic evolution. The lesson: revenge is a temporary hit of dopamine. Healing requires acknowledging that the 9-year-old version of you deserved better. Again, that's where the cognitive behavior techniques would come in. Figuring out how to break that cycle, break that pattern in your head so that maybe the 10-year-old version of her would own it and be like, yeah, I'm Susie Underpants because I got cool undies. Doesn't have to show them, but like, you speak to that with that pride thing, and people are less likely to bully you because you're owning whatever that new name is. Again, my name is Karen Mathison. I was called Bullshitsky in 7th and 8th grade because that was just a fun way to rephrase my name when I was on the school bus for 45 minutes to get to Catholic school. I leaned into it, and as soon as I started to lean in, they stopped. So it's how you choose to move forward. And even with Mathison, I spell it out for people. That's math is on. And you can't really do anything with it anyway, but it makes it a clever way to remember. So you own what you might be self-conscious about. Sometimes that helps. Holding space for pet loss. To Ross, stop letting them tell you that he's just a monkey. You provided a home for a living creature, and he provided you with a sense of purpose. And he was a different kind of pet. You know, he was more of a roommate. He had thumbs. He knew how to change the channel and how to put it on another language, and he was the only one that could do that. He knew how to turn the stereo on. He knew how to poop in shoes. He was clever and mischievous, like a 2-year-old in a way. Knew how to get into stuff, didn't know right from wrong really, and probably kind of enjoyed ticking everybody off because he got a reaction. And sometimes, whether it's positive or negative, a reaction's a reaction, right? It's attention. Anyway, it's okay to miss him, Ross, and it's okay to feel replaced by his new Hollywood lifestyle. And hopefully he'll never forget what you provided him to begin with, because he wouldn't be the monkey he was in the movie if it hadn't have been for the time that he spent in that New York apartment with Ross Geller. And the lesson here is that grief doesn't care about the species of what or who you lost. Grief is grief. If you've loved someone, whether they have 2 legs, 4 legs, scales, fur, doesn't matter. If you've loved someone or something that much, you feel the impact when they're not here anymore. And maybe nobody else in your world understands that, but your pain is valid, and you need to take the time that you deserve to heal, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. So here's some what if scenarios. What if Chandler had truly apologized to Susie when he first saw her instead of just trying to get a date? If he had acknowledged the weight of his actions, Susie might not have felt the need to strip him of his dignity. And what if the parents at the library had used Phoebe's songs as a jumping off point to have honest conversations with their kids? Instead of firing her for the truth, they could have embraced the curiosity. So have you or known someone that was a Susie Underpants? I feel like we all have had that one thing, that one moment from middle school or high school that still makes our ears hot when we think about it. Maybe it was a nickname, a public rejection, or a prank that went too far. When we don't acknowledge these moments as losses, loss of dignity, loss of social standing, loss of safety, they ferment. They turn into the kind of resentment that makes you want to steal someone's clothes in a bathroom stall 2 decades later. If you're carrying a minor childhood trauma, stop calling it minor. If it still stings, it's still active. Validate that kid version of you. Tell them that it sucked and you didn't deserve it. You don't need a revenge plot. You need a witness. Don't let your grief go commando. This episode was about masks. Joey pretending to be Drake, Ross looking for a monkey that didn't remember him, and Susie pretending to be a love interest while plotting a crime. When we hide our grief, we have to wear these exhausting masks. So stop hiding. Whether you're grieving a pet, a childhood memory, or the person you used to be before life got honest, your feelings deserve a seat at the table. In our next episode, we're looking at season 2, episode 14, the one with the prom video. And get ready, because we're diving deep into the grief of the fat girl and the nice guy tropes. and how we look back at our younger selves with a mix of love and mourning. Don't forget to check out thenakedgrief.com. What you'll find here is a private, judgment-free space to process what's changed, practical tools, prompts, and guidance that you can use right away, multiple styles of support that you can choose what fits and switch it if you need to, a path to find what you're looking for, one small step at a time. If you're not ready for therapy or coaching yet, but you know that you need something, you're in the right place. And definitely check out thenakedgrief.com. I'm evolving so many things as we speak. I have the daily motivator. I am working on something called a raw reset, which is a automated prompt of cognitive behavior techniques in the Naked Grief fashion. It's going to be a part of all of the membership community circles. It's a great tool. I created it because while I was in the physical grief of adjusting to my new face with the scar, which honestly is starting to heal pretty darn good, other than this one raised piece, it's just a really small line, and it hasn't even been 2 weeks. But going through that, I was definitely feeling the brain fog of grief. I was feeling the exhaustion while also fighting with the website rebuilds and recent book edits that I'm still waiting for the publisher to come back and say, yeah, we can proceed, or no, we can't. You got to still fix this and that. I'm trying to develop so many things, and everything's coming together at one time, which is awesome. But when one piece of the mechanic breaks, you lose all of your momentum. And I started seeing all of these different cognitive behavioral type support systems that were out there. And when I've got the knowledge, I understand it, let me create my own, let me help myself. I can validate this, and then I can provide it in my community. So I have things like this that I'm building out to better help anyone that needs it. And if you haven't seen one of my more recent articles in Brains Magazine, you should understand that I know grief comes with a heavy price tag, and I refuse to charge too much. So you would get this included in my grief and strength wisdom circles for the $27 a month, or in Healing Hearts, which is $47. And the only reason it's $47 is because it includes the grief wisdom circle. So when you think about the fact that most coaching sessions or counseling sessions are generally over $100 an hour, and you can come and go as you please within the community, revisit the content, rework it, don't come for a couple of weeks and then go on and just plow through everything. It makes it more flexible and easier on your pocket so that you can spend your money where it matters. Keeping your lights on, spending time with your family, on a date, with your kids, whatever that looks like. But I know that when I was going through it, part of why I paused was because not knowing exactly which path I needed, I didn't want to be throwing money at a wall to see what sticks. I wanted to figure it out on my own. It's why I went back to school. So I hope that helps. Stay tuned for next week with the one with the prom video. Until then, be kind to your past self. And for heaven's sake, keep your panties on. Da 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 da.